Hello everyone, I'm your host, Justin, and welcome to Follow His Light. Before beginning today's episode, I want to give a bit of a shout out to the Book of Mormon videos available on YouTube and through the Gospel Library app. They are wonderful adaptations of the stories we read and help to bring to life the experiences of those who lived many, many years ago. This is to say nothing of their value in study. I've added them to my personal study tool belt and have found a greater presence of the Spirit and further guidance by doing so. So if you're feeling a lack of the Spirit in your life, try watching these church-produced videos. I also want to give a brief shout out to Dustin Burton. I've seen your replies on Spotify, and I'm glad to see someone who enjoys what I create. I've often said that if I could change even one person's life for the better, I would consider it a success. I hope I can do that this year for you, as well as anyone else who may listen. I also want to apologize for my lateness. I've had some technical issues on my end. If I sound a bit different this episode, it's because I've had to switch over to and learn a new set of software. I also accidentally recorded the next episode first, which I'm glad to say I at least had scripted out somewhat early. Either way, I'm here now, so on with the episode. Continuing from where we left off last time, the account once more focuses in on Nephi and his righteous desires to understand what the Lord meant in his father's dream. Alongside this desire was the firm faith that the Lord was able to make them known unto him, faith which would pay off tenfold as he was given not only the vision of the tree of life, but also many more things. Nephi records as being caught away in the Spirit of the Lord into an exceedingly high mountain. Much like Moses of old, this high place became Nephi's place for communion during this vision. The significance hardly ends there. We read that temples are described as mountains of the Lord, for even so does the Lord visit these holy places to give guidance to his servants, especially to his prophets. Appropriately, it is upon this place that Nephi's great vision begins. After witnessing the tree, he sees Mary, the mother of Jesus, as well as Jesus himself, including his life and death. However, this vision is more than simply a look into things to come. It was a lesson. The Spirit asked what Nephi desired, and he desired to understand the dream. Instead of simply answering the questions, the Spirit allowed Nephi to find his own answers through what I can only classify as the greatest object lesson ever given. It's hard to compare when your teacher is one of the three members of the Godhead. We, of course, also see this teaching when he asked Nephi regarding the condescension of God. Wise as ever, Nephi gave the famous answer, "I know that he loveth his children, nevertheless I do not know the meaning of all things." What a perfect display of faith! Though he did not understand the meaning of the question, he did reaffirm that which he knew. Knowledge is power in this gospel, and Nephi held to his in the face of uncertainty. I spoke in the previous episode about how relatable the family of Nephi was, with good and bad times alike, feuds between brothers, concerns with parents, all these and many more. We can see some of ourselves in each of the family members. Yet reading about Nephi's vision, I was reminded of the similarities to Nephi's people and our day. Indeed, Nephi even described his people as experiencing wars and rumors of wars. Can we not relate during such a tumultuous time as this? Not to mention this occurs before the coming of Christ to his people, much as we await the return of our Lord and Savior. It is proof that the world really does run in cycles. Good prevails for a time, then pride, and eventually war. It is only through the Lord that we find lasting peace. After Nephi's vision, he recounts speaking with his older brothers, who are debating over what their father's dream meant. There's a very interesting dialogue between the three, in which the elder brothers state firmly that, regarding any understanding of the dream, the Lord maketh no such thing known unto them. I've seen countless commentaries on the matter, with most concluding that it was something they had decided in their hearts long before seeking the Lord's help. The scriptures preceding it certainly evidence this point, mentioning them being hard in their hearts, as well as not keeping the commandments of the Lord. Imagine the surprise, then, when after speaking many words unto his brethren, that they did humble themselves before the Lord. Here are two older brothers infamous for their lack of faith and unwillingness to listen, and yet in this one particular occasion, the two were willing to be guided by their youngest sibling. This continues into the next chapter, providing Nephi with joy and great hopes that they would walk in the paths of righteousness. Imagine having so great a faith in his brothers, even after seeing all that must come to pass. Furthermore, consider the enduring power of hope present, such that Nephi surely felt some peace in his soul at this time. This peace will unfortunately not last, but let us move forward. On the topic of faith, we come to the brass ball of curious workmanship known as the Liahona. This compass of sorts, as we will come to see, is powered by the faith of those present, a faith fuel that would suffer when Nephi broke his bow. Now I think we can all relate to the unpleasantness of hunger to some degree. The modern hangry term comes to mind here. Imagine then an entire family suffering in this way. Imagine being in the middle of nowhere with no way to obtain food. Imagine the concern and fear that may arise. Perhaps with this in mind, we will have more sympathy towards not only Laman and Lemuel, but also towards Lehi. Yes, even Lehi began to murmur against the Lord his God. Yet consider Nephi once more. After speaking to his family regarding their murmuring, he goes and creates a new bow and arrow, and then what does he do? He asks his father for guidance to find food. I've returned to this story a number of times in my life, and it still astonishes me that Nephi didn't simply take the situation on himself and find food without any guidance. There are a number of reasons he may have done this, though I doubt inability to be one of them. No, I think the more likely reason was a desire to empower his father in a righteous way, reminding him of not only his duty to guide, but also showing faith in his ability to do so. The Lord certainly had words to speak unto Lehi and his family, simply for how quickly they had murmured against him. Nevertheless, he did guide them, and they did find food. Their joy was great, their hope was restored, and all was once again well. Before moving to the next story, however, let me refer back to that small choice Nephi made to defer to his father's judgment in finding food. It was a minor decision, one that could have easily been overlooked or disregarded entirely, yet it re-inspired a man who had lost his faith and hope. In Nephi's own words, it is proof that by small means the Lord can bring about great things. Unfortunately, the troubles would soon arise once more. Ishmael was soon laid down to rest permanently, a matter that would trouble our traveling party. In the midst of their sorrows and murmuring, Laman and Lemuel devised a plan to kill their youngest brother Nephi. If this wasn't troubling enough, note that they also denied having seen an angel of the Lord, stating that Nephi did work many things by his cunning arts, that he may deceive their eyes. Now I don't know exactly what the timeline was between their seeing an angel and the present time of this story, but I will say it is a saddening evidence of how quickly we can forget the Lord and his goodness. If we do not allow our hearts to dwell with him, he will not dwell with us. Thankfully, the Lord was with Nephi, and did speak much to his family on this matter. Their anger was quelled, at least for now. And what would Nephi say during the midst of all these afflictions? I quote, "And also I, Nephi, had been blessed of the Lord exceedingly." What an incredible testimony of looking towards the Lord with hope during times where it seemed nearly impossible to find any. Indeed, the account of the Lord's blessings is a new highlight I discovered in reading through 1 Nephi again. It's very interesting the way he frames even their sufferings in the wilderness with prior mentions of what the Lord had done to ensure they were able to make it safely to the land eventually known as Bountiful, a land they named after even more blessings that Nephi and his family attribute to the Lord. Now we come to the story of Nephi building the boat. There is a very clear distinction between the way he responded versus his brothers. From the beginning, after only giving him an idea of what the boat he would build would even look like, Nephi's response to the request was simply to ask where to find supplies to make the tools. He was a man of unshakable faith, such that he went forward once again, not knowing exactly how he would accomplish the Lord's commands, but knowing that he would nonetheless. By contrast, we see the words of the elder brothers Laman and Lemuel, who speak of the impossibility that their youngest sibling could possibly build a ship. Indeed, in a point I find personally bothersome, they even take pleasure in his discouragement in seeing their stubbornness. It is true that there must needs be an opposition in all things, as we will later read, but I find the act of finding joy in others' sorrow to be particularly reprehensible, never mind that saddened person being one guided by the Lord. Yet this is a story of faith and perseverance. In spite of their constant complaining, which surely must have worn on his patience, Nephi still spoke to his older brothers in an attempt to convince them of the words their father had spoken. Furthermore, much as we are doing now, he used the scriptures to back up his claims. If I can refer back to those Book of Mormon videos for a moment, Laman and Lemuel made an interesting comment to Nephi. Simply put, "You're not Moses." The implication being that Moses was a far greater man, and how could Nephi ever hope to measure up to his accomplishments? Perhaps we can all see some of ourselves here. We may look at our scriptural heroes and think they could do this, but we can't. We may consider the great list of things they could do, and then compare to our own daily lives and think, will I ever do something worthy of remembering? To this, let me remind you that in the Lord's eyes, each soul is of great worth. Each action we do to the least of those around us is done unto him. Each good deed is recorded in heaven. In other words, though what we do may not end up written in the history books, we can still have a profound impact on those around us as well as ourselves. Indeed, I recall a quote, one I unfortunately cannot find again, stating that history is full of such people. Those who were faithful to the end, even while living lives that would seem to most eyes unremarkable. Yet it is by the backbone of faith that we lift up countless people and generations to come. And I feel this is a good note to end on. May you find the blessings of the Lord as you faithfully endure trials and help others to do so. Until we meet again, God bless and have a wonderful evening.